Hey, everybody out there in podcast land, welcome to the latest episode of the Fortress of Rock. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, glad to have you aboard here. Episode 62, October the 21st, 2022. Little bit of an abbreviated episode. Little shorter than normal, but not much. Still got plenty to talk about. A couple album reviews. Lots of historical moments, birthdays in rock history to tear through. But first and foremost, as always, news of the world in tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen. The latest in rock and roll news. Of course, pretty much every week, we're going to have some news about tours, and this week is no exception. After wrapping up very successfully the stadium tour finally after COVID delays, Motley Crue and Def Leppard have announced they will be touring Latin America and Europe in 2023. And of course, the Crue have hinted that they're going to be coming back around to the United States in 2024. Journey, the relentlessly touring Journey, going out on their 50th anniversary tour with Toto. Of course, they toured with Toto earlier this year. So check that out. I believe the tour starts early 2023 in Savannah, Georgia. And then finally, of course, Ticketmaster still doing everything in their power to make the concert-going, ticket-buying experience as miserable as possible for all of us. We've already talked about Bruce Springsteen and how that all went down with this new dynamic pricing model. And while these financial numbers aren't as staggering as the Springsteen financial numbers, Blink-182, of course, announced that they were going to get back together and go out on tour, put out some new music. Tickets went on sale here recently for that tour. And yes, Ticketmaster used dynamic pricing again. Interesting side note, one of the members of Blink-182 tried to buy tickets, wanted to see what the experience was like, and even he said it was ridiculous, it was miserable. He had tickets in his cart, pulled out. And again, I know the financial numbers aren't as intimidating as they were for the Boss, but tickets were going for $200 for nosebleed seats, anywhere up to $600 for the better seats. Again, I know there has been a little bit of grumbling in the government about trying to resolve this issue. There's one congressman in particular, I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. We discussed it a month or two back after the Springsteen situation reared its ugly head. Something's got to get done about this, and I know it's not as important as the environment or world peace or partisan bickering. But think about all the people that go to concerts. Millions and millions of people every year who go to concerts, and how this affects them, and how we have got a monopoly for the most part. Yes, there are smaller services out there for smaller venues, but when it comes to the bigger venues, Ticketmaster and Live Nation are a monopoly. They need to be stopped. They need to be either regulated or broken apart, because it's gone too far now. This is a complete and total cash grab. I do not want to hear their excuse that they're trying to stop the scalpers. This is worse than anything I have ever seen in the past, buying concert tickets in terms of dealing with the bots and the scalpers. This is basically Ticketmaster saying, well, if we can't have the money, nobody will. And only the rich will be able to go see concerts, or people will have to go into massive debt in order to go see a show. And speaking of stupidity, a while back we talked about Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders, and you know I have no love for that band. Not their music, that's not what I'm talking about. There's some really good stuff the Pretenders put out, but I use them as the poster children for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and how flawed the system is to put people in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because there are dozens of acts who deserve to be in the Rock Hall of Fame who are eligible ahead of Chrissie Hynde and the Pretenders. Well, Chrissie Hynde is another one of these old school rockers who hates her fans, it seems like. She made the comment months back she was not going to play the Pretenders hits anymore. Now, lo and behold, she pulled out Brass in Pocket for the London Taylor Hawkins tribute show. But she just wrapped up a small club tour recently, not with the Pretenders, herself and her backing band, only playing to a couple hundred people per night. And of course, she's complaining and whining and crying because she lost money on the tour. Saying, well, a little bit of paraphrasing here, but I'm close. It's not fair that we have to give up staying in nice hotels and taking buses from one show to the next. I mean, do we have to go back to the days when we were in a van and we had to pack up and assemble our own equipment? Poor Chrissie Hynde. I am shedding so many tears right now. I'm surprised my laptop isn't shorting out as my tears pummel the keyboard and seep into the motherboard. Here's the thing, Chrissie. Maybe you shouldn't have made that bold declaration months ago about how you weren't going to play the hits anymore. Maybe you would have got more people to buy tickets to your concerts. And then, of course, she made this offhand comment that really is the icing on the cake. And this part is a direct quote. When asked about why she's not playing the hits anymore, why she decided to go in that direction, and I'm telling you, this is a dead shot aim at rock and roll fans and her disdain for her own fans. She said, quote, "More fool you," unquote, "for not going out over the past 40 years, seeing us in concert and hearing the hits live then." Basically, tough noogies now, I'm not doing it anymore. Now, I believe since she's kind of softened her stance and backtracked on it a little bit, but still, this is why I can't stand Chrissie Hynde. She is the ultimate pretentious rock and roller. It's why I lump her in with Neil Young and Eddie Vedder and Bob Dylan. And now even a guy like John Mellencamp, who I really love. I'm going to see him in concert. But am I expecting him to play the hits? No, because just like Chrissie Hynde, he's come out in the past and said, I'm not really into playing these hits anymore. Again, the blatant disdain for the fans is incredible to me. In some Van Halen news, I can't really go too long without talking about Van Halen. The classic 1978 Eddie Van Halen, David Lee Roth, McDonald's photo St. Louis, Missouri. Brilliant photo. They have just opened up a new McDonald's in the same location. Of course, this was one of the original McDonald's when this picture was taken back in 1978. I believe it was store number 71. That'll give you some indication of how old it was. So brand new, they've razed it to the ground. They've built a brand new McDonald's in the same location. And as they open this new McDonald's, they unveil inside the lobby a nice, large, beautiful duplicate of the Eddie Van Halen David Lee Roth 78 photograph. Yes, kids, some people still get it. We can still have fun in this world. I'm sure somebody's going to complain. What are you doing putting these pictures of these long-haired hippie weirdos in a family restaurant? Kudos to the owners of this St. Louis McDonald's. I believe it's owned privately. I don't believe it's a corporate store. And then finally, wrapping up news of the world, some interesting new music coming out. Not guaranteeing a review yet. I want to listen to it first. It sounds like a very bizarre, yet somehow fitting collaboration between Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top and Morris Day of The Time. Yeah, I know. They really got to process this one. Story goes they met in a liquor store and finalized this idea to collaborate. The song now out is called Too Much Girl for Me. Of course, 4 being the numeral 4. I am intrigued to listen to this and see what we're going to get from Billy Gibbons and Morris Day. And that's going to do it for News of the World. As I mentioned, a little bit shorter episode this week than normal. Coming up next in Breakdown, as I mentioned, 2 album reviews, Queensryche and The Cult. So hang out for a quick promo and I will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, the news of the world, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, Breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane, episode 62, October the 21st, 2022. An abbreviated Fortress for you this week. Concert got in the way, Judas Priest and Queensryche. So had to shorten things up a bit. The taping schedule was a bit inconvenienced, but I am loyal. Got to give you some content this week. Couple album reviews for you. We're going to skip songs this week. We did a ton of them last week. So now we'll give you 2 album reviews. Save some of these new songs that we mentioned at the end of last week's episode. We're going to save those for next week, pair those up with my review of Judas Priest and Queensryche live. But first, got to take care of some business. I made a glaring omission last week. As I discussed with you, Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers live at the Hi-Fi in Indianapolis. I completely zoned out on discussing the opening act. Now, it's probably nobody you have ever heard of, but the 3 times I've seen Roger Clyne, the second time I was blessed to see the Black Moods open for Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers in Kalamazoo, Michigan some years back. And the Black Moods are now one of my favorite bands out there. So this time around at the Hi-Fi in Indianapolis, the opening act was Zach Wilkerson. Let me tell you, this guy is fantastic, especially if you like old school blues rock. Unbelievably strong voice. I'm not going to say he's overly flashy when it comes to his guitar work, but it's solid. He's got a great stage presence. Very funny at times. So, as I mentioned, go see Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers any and every chance you get. But if you ever get a chance to see Zach Wilkerson, I would imagine, just like Roger Clyne, he does a lot of his touring in the southwestern United States. I believe he said he's from Texas. Texas and maybe Oklahoma, split time between those 2 states. But Zach Wilkerson is fantastic. Now, moving on to the 2 album reviews this week on The Fortress. I promised you Queensryche, Digital Noise Alliance. Of course, prepping for tonight's show. As I see them open for Judas Priest. I have to admit I was not overly impressed with Digital Noise Alliance. I've never been the biggest Queensryche fan. I do like them, and I think Empire is a phenomenal album. But all of their other catalog, it's okay. I'm fine with it, but it's not essential for me. Now, of course, there was the ugly split years ago with their lead singer, Jeff Tate, which doesn't help matters because they did what all these other legacy bands do. They went out and they found a lead singer who sounds very similar to their previous lead singer. But there's just something missing from the new version of Queensryche. This will actually be the second time I've seen them in concert. I saw them open years ago for Scorpions. And they were fine, again, but I found myself really just looking forward to the songs they played from Empire. But again, wanted to be prepared as they play in Kalamazoo tonight, October the 21st. So I want to make sure I knew their new songs. Okay, Digital Noise Alliance starts off with In Extremis. And maybe it's just me, but a lot of this album, you can cherry pick. About half of the album to me sounds like, intentionally or otherwise, old classic legacy hard rock heavy metal bands. So the first track sounded a bit to me like Iron Maiden. It was okay. Nothing spectacular. Didn't have that that push, that grabbing effect that you would hope to get on the first song of an album. Song 2 gets a little bit better. It's called Chapters. And again, I thought I heard a little bit of Deep Purple in here. Lead singer actually kind of channeling Ian Gillan. It's got a moderately catchy chorus to it. So we're 2 songs in, getting a little better. Then, unfortunately, we hit a couple clunkers, for lack of a better term. Lost in Sorrow and Sick Death, tracks 3 and 4, I just had no interest in. Just boring, dull, generic Queensryche. Track 5, Behind the Walls, was a little better. Again, another well-written chorus. Then we get dull again with track 6, Nocturnal Light. Track 7, Out of the Black, sounded very similar to Judas Priest to me, of course, the band they're touring with right now. Again, not terrible, decent song. Then we hit track 8, Forest, which is obviously a blatant attempt to redo Silent Lucidity. From recent music, it kind of harkened back a few years to Perdita from Stone Temple Pilots. It's, again, just okay. Then we hit another dull one, track 9, called Realms. Track 10, Hold On. The more I listened to it, it grew on me a little bit. Pretty good song. This song is where the lead singer sounds most like his predecessor, Jeff Tate, in my opinion. Then we get the epic track 11, Tormentum. Has some aspects of Empire the Song, including that, if you remember Empire the Song, the spoken word interlude that Jeff Tate recites statistics about law enforcement. Now, this song is about something completely different. It's not topical like that, but there is that spoken word interlude. In addition to hearkening back to Empire, again, I got a little bit of a Judas Priest feel to this song. Probably my favorite song on the album, but that's not saying much, unfortunately. And then finally, track 12, Don't Ask Me Why. It's a cover song that I would never expect Queensryche to do. I don't usually think of them as a cover band. Again, maybe it's because Jeff Tate is gone. But they decide to cover Billy Idol's Rebel Yell to close out Digital Noise Alliance. It's faithful, almost too faithful. It doesn't really add anything new to the classic Billy Idol song. And again, an odd choice to close out the album. I think Tormentum would have been better. I think they would have been better off just skipping Rebel Yell altogether, maybe perform it in concert. But you can tell by how I've kind of slogged through this review that I really wasn't all that pleased with Digital Noise Alliance. It is not an album that I see myself listening to in the future. I will probably be done with Queensryche for a while after this concert tonight. Digital Noise Alliance just didn't do it for me. Now, our second album review this week, a little better. Definitely better. I wasn't optimistic based on a review or two that I read for the Cult's Under the Midnight Sun. I believe it was Ultimate Classic Rock that posted a review, and I'm paraphrasing here. They basically implied it was mature, but didn't really rock. And I will dispute that. I will dispute that. While there are no massive, catchy songs on this, like She Sells Sanctuary or Firewoman, it's a pretty solid, consistent set of songs. Now, it's short. Under the Midnight Sun only has 8 tracks on it. Start off with the solid opener, Mirror. And then a couple of these songs we've discussed in the past here on the Fortress when they were released as singles. Song 2 is one of those, A Cut Inside. Probably my favorite song on the album was the second single. Billy Duffy's guitar is hard, crunchy. I love it. Very, very good song, A Cut Inside. Song 3 is Vendetta X. Maybe Vendetta 10, if they're going with Roman numerals. Again, just like Mirror, a really solid Cult song. Same can be said for track 4. Of course, the lead-off single from Under the Midnight Sun, Give Me Mercy. So we're halfway through the album, and again, like I said, it's a short album with only 8 songs. But the first half, very, very good. I was impressed. And again, it's not melt your face off rock and roll, but it's got great guitar work, very catchy, well-written songs through the first half. Then things kind of slide a bit as we get into the second half. Maybe a lot of this is what Ultimate Classic Rock was referring to, because with the 5th song, Outer Heaven, we get strings and acoustic guitar. It's not a bad song. It's passable, let's put it that way. But again, maybe this is where Ultimate Classic Rock, this point on, is where they feel like this album kind of fails in terms of its rock and roll pedigree, let's put it that way. Track 6 is the cool title, Knife Through Butterfly Heart. Again, acoustic guitar flourishes, piano flourishes. Again, good but not great song. I do have to give props again to Billy Duffy for more great guitar work. There's some slide guitar in there that transitions to heavier work. Track 7 is Impermanence. Probably my least favorite song on the album. There are some really, really bad Ian Astbury lyrics here. This one line in particular stood out to me. Tears from the dream stream. What? And we all know Ian Astbury is a little nutsy cuckoo at times. Sorry, I mean that in the best possible rock and roll sense. Then finally, the title track is what the album closes out with, Under the Midnight Sun. Strings again. Now, what I will say, again, you compare the first half, which is more straight ahead, meat and potatoes, cult rock and roll, to the second half of this album, which is definitely a little more mellow. Of the 4 songs on the second half of the album, I think the title track, Under the Midnight Sun, works the best when it comes to using the strings and being a little bit more mid-tempo than the first part of the album. I actually thought that the title song is pretty gorgeous. It's a pretty awesome tune. So as opposed to Queensryche's Digital Noise Alliance, I can give a moderate recommendation to Under the Midnight Sun. It's been a while since the Cult put out a really, really, really good album. I wouldn't say this is up there with the best in their catalog. It's somewhere in the middle. But still good enough for you to check out. Maybe you'll like it a little bit more than me, especially that second half as it gets a little more mellow. But Under the Midnight Sun, of the 2 albums this week, definitely the better of the 2. And that is going to do it for Breakdown this week. Of course, Breakdown each and every week, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. When we get here to the end of this episode and wrap it up, we'll talk about what we're going to have on the docket for the next month and a half. It's going to be a lot of the same things we discussed last week, but we'll run through those again here in a few minutes. And this is the time, before we go to our break in our promo, where I just want to let you guys know where you can find the Fortress of Rock. You've obviously already found it somewhere if you're listening to it with me right now, but you do have options. Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon, and Audible. And of course, don't forget to check out our Facebook page, participate in the Weekend Rock Project, check out the video of the week on New Music Sunday. A little bit more going on than just the podcast. And of course, on the Facebook page, you will also be able to find quick links to each and every podcast episode. All right, next up is I Want to Go Back. Anniversaries of classic album releases, moments in rock history, birthdays. So hang out with me for a little bit longer. Hope you're enjoying your Friday afternoon and evening. I will be right back. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. Welcome back to the Fortress of Rock. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Episode 62, October the 21st, 2022. Segment 3, as always, I want to go back, along with our reviews, probably the funnest segment on the show because we get to go in the rock and roll DeLorean, go back in time, look back at those moments, the birthdays of performers that have influenced us the most as rock and roll fanatics. Starting off with anniversaries, did a pretty good job this week of sticking to the date. I know I've been kind of floating around a little bit the last couple weeks, taking liberties. I will stick with today's date, October the 21st, with one notable exception, and you will understand why. As we look back one day at October the 20th, going back to 1977, the tragic plane crash that killed members of the band Lynyrd Skynyrd. Of course, the band still in different forms throughout the years since the crash. They soldier on. One Van Zant replaces another. Richie Medlock, of course, has joined, formerly of Blackfoot. But of course, it seems like plane crashes defined moments in rock and roll throughout the 60s, the 70s. So, of course, thoughts and prayers go out to the extended family, the Lynyrd Skynyrd extended family, as yesterday is a terrible, terrible anniversary for them. Now we jump up a little bit in time, but we are going to stick now for the rest of this segment with today, October the 21st. Unfortunately, a couple more sad notes here. Starting off with October the 21st, 2006. Sandy West passed away. All you rock and roll historians out there, of course, know that Sandy West was the drummer for the Runaways. One of the, if not the most influential all-female bands in rock history. We'll have a little bit more on another one of those in a few minutes. But of course, the Runaways gave us Joan Jett, Lita Ford. But unfortunately, on this day back in 2006, their drummer, Sandy West, died. Going back now to October the 21st, 1976. Again, another somber note. In Toronto on this date in 1976, Keith Moon played his last show with The Who, of course, their drummer. Addiction problems, alcohol problems. Died of an overdose of a medication that was supposed to help him combat alcohol withdrawal. And again, just like Lynyrd Skynyrd, The Who have soldiered on through this tragedy. John Entwistle's passing. Kenny Jones, of course, came in, played on a couple great Who albums in the 80s. And then a little bit of levity here. Let's have a little bit of fun here before we move on to birthdays. Lighten the mood. October the 21st, 1972. Kind of surprised by this. I did not realize Chuck Berry, rock legend that he is, or was, His only number one song in the United States, 1972, hit number one on this day. And it's the comical, brilliant, sexual innuendo full My Ding-A-Ling. One of the greatest songs out there in rock history, along with a couple ZZ Top songs. You can fill in the blank, the rest of the list with your favorites, you perverts out there. My Ding-A-Ling, of course, one of the greatest songs in rock history, to be really kind of dirty and filthy, but being smart enough to disguise it so that it could get radio airplay and be a number one hit. All right, before we move on to birthdays, this is the time in every episode where I acknowledge my sources for a lot of these story ideas. But again, the disclaimer each and every week is always, story ideas might come from these places, but the opinions are not theirs. The opinions are mine and mine alone. UltimateClassicRock.com, ThisDayInMusic.com, and the Van Halen News Desk, of course. All right, moving on to birthdays here, and I want to go back. Again, jumping in the DeLorean, most recent, and then we will go back all the way into the 1940s. October the 21st, 1971, 51 years old today, Nick Oliveri worked a lot with Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age. And I always botch the name of his former band, Kiss. I want to say Kiss, but I know it's not that weird spelling, Kyuss, Kiss. But of course, anybody who works with Josh Homme gets notified and gets recognition here because of how awesome QOTSA are. October the 21st, 1957, Steve Lukather, of course, probably most well known for being one of the leaders, one of the figureheads for the band Toto, but an all-around studio genius, producer, engineer, session player. We mentioned in the first segment that Toto is going out on the road next year with Journey again. Steve Lukather, 65 years old today. We mentioned the Runaways earlier in this segment. Going back to October the 21st, 1953, Charlotte Caffey, one of the members of the Go-Go's, is 69 years old today. Of course, the Go-Go's would be another one of those extremely influential all-female bands like the Runaways. Take your pick. Those are probably 1-2 in the all-time pantheon. You might have your preference for which one you would take. I'd probably go with the Go-Go's, but again, more so because they came to prominence in my formative years when I was just starting to really develop my love for rock and roll. Going back, as I mentioned, to the 40s for a couple birthdays here. October the 21st, 1942, Elvin Bishop, 80 years old today. Most well known for one of the greatest songs of the 1970s, number 3 hit in the US, 1976. Still will hear it on the radio to this day because it's that damn good of a song. Fooled Around and Fell in Love. Happy birthday to Elvin Bishop. And finally, October the 21st, 1940, 82 years old today, Manfred Mann. Of course, Manfred Mann's Earth Band, lots of Bruce Springsteen cover songs that became hits, including, of course, the song they're probably most well known for. Some would argue Do Wah Diddy. That's fine. But Blinded by the Light would be my choice. And as I mentioned, made a lot of money for Bruce Springsteen by covering 3 of his songs that all became hits to different extents. Of course, Blinded by the Light was the biggest. So happy birthday to Manfred Mann. And that's going to do it for our look back at rock and roll history. I want to go back. Again, a little bit shorter episode overall this week. It's concert time for the Maestro tonight, so got to get going, got to hit the road here in a few hours as I'm taping this. Stay tuned for segment 4. Wrap it up, where I will tell you next week what concert I will be reviewing for you, if you haven't already figured it out with all the clues and the blatant drops that I've done over the past few weeks. One more quick promo, a few more minutes to discuss upcoming reviews, and wrap it up. Stay tuned, kids. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, kids, that's going to about do it for this week on the Fortress of Rock. Again, a little bit shorter episode than normal due to the Judas Priest Queensryche concert that I'm going to be heading out for here very, very soon. Of course, clunky, awkward segue, obvious segue. Next week on the Fortress of Rock here, as we wrap it up, will be my review of Judas Priest and Queensryche live at Wings Stadium in Kalamazoo, Michigan. As I mentioned back in segment 2, probably going to be leaning heavily on songs since we didn't do any singles this week. So basically, the same songs that we discussed at the end of last week's episode are still going to be on the agenda. The new song with Freddie Mercury from Queen that they dug up from the archives, Face It Alone. John Cougar Mellencamp's Carolina Shag, an unreleased track off his upcoming Deluxe Scarecrow set. Bruce Springsteen's cover of the Commodores, Night Shift. The second of 3 bonus tracks coming, and you guys know I'm not happy about this, Money Grab, from one of my favorite artists. Second of 3 bonus tracks on the Mammoth WVH Expanded Edition coming out soon. Second release is As Long As You're Not You. And then, of course, very excited, a band I just discovered here earlier this year, opening for Greta Van Fleet, Rival Sons. Their new song is Nobody Wants to Die. Now, have I listened to most of these? Yes. I just haven't listened to them enough where I feel like I can give you full reviews yet. But next week, we'll knock out a bunch of these songs, along with maybe an album. If we do an album next week, if we have time, it's probably going to be the brand new Skid Row album, The Gang's All Here. Again, I have listened to this. This is going to be a recommendation. I can tell you that right now. This sounds like old school Skid Row a la Sebastian Bach era. A couple other albums we're going to get to eventually, I promise. You guys know I've been looking forward to Alter Bridge, the new album Pawns and Kings, as well as Bush, The Art of Survival. Quick story here before we close down the shop for this week. Going back to Alter Bridge, I don't know why I am the only person on the face of the earth that has delivery issues with Amazon. Not all the time. And for the most part, of course, they're reliable. They are one of the best companies in America. But they lost my CD, Pawns and Kings. They lost it. So I waited and waited. Of course, Pawns and Kings came out last Friday. I was supposed to get it on the release day. Waited all weekend. I'm getting notifications from them saying, well, we don't have any tracking information beyond Friday evening, so we think your package might be lost. So I waited and I waited until Tuesday when there were still no updates. And I finally told them, just give me my money back. If you find it, go ahead, cancel the delivery. And then I go to try to reorder it because the price was still the same. I figure, let me just go ahead and reorder it again. Well, lo and behold, it'll take 2 to 4 weeks for us to get Pawns and Kings to you. I sincerely wonder if they just snookered me and never got it in to begin with, but for some reason told me they had shipped it that first time around last week. So, of course, I'll listen to it on Spotify. A lot of you out there, including my daughter, just shaking your head going, why are you even buying physical music anymore? I've told you guys, I just like physical music. I like CDs. I like the liner notes, the album art. So eventually, hopefully, I'll get my copy of Pawns and Kings from Amazon. But until then, I will have a review of it for you coming up in the next few weeks as I delve into it on Spotify. All right, thanks for indulging me there, as I needed to vent a little bit about that experience. Like I said, most of the time Amazon comes through, but every once in a while, I don't know, couple, 2-3 times a year I get dumped on like this. And I just don't know why when everybody else raves and raves and raves and says they can do no wrong. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I am heading out to go see Rob Halford and company. Have that review for you next week. This will be the second time I have seen Judas Priest in the last year or so, after never getting to see them in my entire life, 50 plus years beforehand, making up for lost time, lost opportunities. So again, hope you guys have a great weekend, a great week leading into next Friday night's Fortress of Rock. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Take care, everybody.